Oh, this is already up. That's why it's up. Okay, let's talk about the work environment. The furniture police. First comment, those making workplace decisions are not themselves doing the kind of work that's likely to suffer from a poor environment. I will add as a corollary, or they already have their offices, so they don't care. In other words, as a software engineer, you'll find that people deciding what sort of environment you're working with have ideas about collaboration and productivity that they don't have to live with. Not always the case. Sometimes they'll eat their own dog food, as the saying goes. But by and large, they're saying, oh, well, you know, it's engineers. We're gonna do this open space, and we can do flex teams, and they'll look at each other, and they'll talk, and they'll be happy, and they'll sing and dance around the maypole. They'll get work. But mostly what you want to do is just everyone to go away and let you work for 7 or 8 hours straight. That's not what most environments are conducive to. I like this, almost without exception, the workspace given to intellect workers is noisy, interruptive, unprivate, and sterile. I did a tour of a company, not a software development company, but a company that deals with technology, communications technology, and so on. And I was really impressed as I was walking through because I actually saw a lot of offices and doors, and sometimes you'd have 2 people in an office, but you'd have actual offices. I thought, oh, this is really good and really enlightened. And then I got to their small software development group, and they were all crammed into a room with not even cubicles, just tables and workstations. I thought, oh my gosh, these are the people who really need the offices. And they're just sort of all crammed into this room, all pretty much sitting on top of each other, no privacy, easily distracted. And it's pretty remarkable how common this is. How many of you have worked in environments, trying to do IT work in environments where it's been a bad environment for you? Oh, lots of hands go up here. Okay, let's get it back.
Well, just the current place I'm working at, I mean, it's the cubicle lineup, so it's like some division, but you just get that one kid who just every 5 minutes wants to like spark up a new conversation about what happened or something. It's like 2 hours later, you get focused again, and right again, something else comes up.
Yes, right next to you.
I used to work at MTC, and we used to have these offices where everybody was crammed right next to each other. So you had 2 monitors, and your monitor was touching a monitor on either side from other people. That's how it was working. And there was like no barrier whatsoever. And I did really poorly, and we moved to the new MTC offices, and suddenly I was the best performer because we finally had these like walls between us. It was really nice.
It makes a big difference. Yes.
So I work in an office where it's a single small office and there are 5 people inside. And half of us are working on one project and half on the second project.
Oh, God.
And so trying to communicate and collaborate is extremely difficult because people are throwing around information that doesn't pertain to me all the time.
Yes.
And so we have one of the offices in the Talmadge building that are just made to be like one professor's office, and there's about I think there's 11 of us working in the lab, and yeah, it's pretty much the worst. And there's probably like 4 or 5 projects between those people. So.
And that's part of the problem. I mean, it's one thing to have everyone who's working on the same project. It's another thing when you've got multiple projects, even just 2, as has been mentioned, or 4 or 5, because stuff pulls you away from what you're thinking about. If it's your own project, you can at least sort of filter it and say, do I care about this or not? When someone's bringing up different projects, like, wait, what are they doing? It distracts you. Yeah?
Yeah, I can testify to that difficulty of the cross-pollination of projects for sure. First development job I had was at an insurance company, and not only were we working in these cramped spaces and cubicles with shared or different projects, but also of different sectors of the business. There were finance people working right next to the developers, and having completely different namespaces that we were always talking about, and that was really tough. I didn't realize how much of a difference that would make until last summer I worked in my own office and didn't know that it was definitely.
The worst horror story I ever heard, I heard this from a friend of mine, oh gosh, probably 20 years ago. He said he'd had a job as a programmer where his boss and he and 2 other programmers were all in the same office with desks that were all turned in and facing each other. And he said, if I wasn't typing fast enough, my boss would glare at me. Now, this is hell on earth. You know, your boss is like 6 feet away looking at you. Are you being productive enough? Whereas, well, I'll save that story till we get to issues of flow. One more, yes.
So we had the monitors touching situation, and then there were people behind us. But then they decided to redesign the floor and lay it out so that we were back to back with the call center. And then they decided they were going to buy noise canceling headphones. So
Yeah, that's always their solution. Well, we'll just buy noise canceling headphones. That doesn't address a lot of issues, including, as someone mentioned, the person who wants to strike up a conversation about something. You have this upper limit on productivity that's based on the willingness of coworkers to interrupt you. Never get anything done here between 9 and 5. This is an interesting conversation because I've lived this. I have a card. I should dig it out. It's buried in my file somewhere. Rich Tennant was a cartoonist, editorial cartoonist for the San Jose Mercury News. May still be, for all I know. But he do one-panel columns, and he had an occasional series called Fifth Wave that was all about technology. And within that, he had a Real Programmers series. And one of my favorite was real programmers do their best work between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. And it shows an office building with all the lights out except for one light in the window and a little balloon saying, "Oh, wow. I have done that." At Pages, as Chief Technical Officer and as Chief Software Architect, I was often had my day chopped up. My most effective programming started at about 7 o'clock in the evening. Because marketing and management and everyone else except programmers all went home. I had my own office, and I'd close my door, and I could get into the zone. And I would sit there and program, and I wasn't getting emails, and I wasn't getting phone calls, and no one was knocking on my door. A lot of why overtime appears to be effective is because you have programmers who are working after work hours. And all the silly meetings and emails and phone calls and everything else go away. We've talked about quality and performance. One of the things that DeMarco and Lister, and again, DeMarco and Lister, a lot of what they talk about is backed up by either their own research or by other research they cite. And they've done over the years, they've done tests and judgments to gauge effectiveness of software development organizations. One of the things they find is that for individuals, the top performers tend to have space that is quieter, more protected, better protected from, more private, better protected from interruption. But this is the interesting thing. They've found an up to 10-to-1 difference in productivity between organizations. In other words, the issue is not simply one of, well, so-and-so is really talented or really well-educated or whatever. It's how effective the organization is. And this is, again, a lot of what we'll talk about with in the book, Accelerate, is what distinguishes high-performing technology organizations from low-performing ones. We've talked about that. We'll just move on here. Saving money on space. Noise. Noise is a big issue. And this is why organizations keep thinking, well, we'll just buy one noise canceling headphones, and that'll solve the problem. Not everyone does that. Again, well, we want you to listen. We want you to spontaneously collaborate. No, I want to hide in my office. When I feel like collaborating, I'll go out and go to the lunchroom or the commons area or something like that. Or I'll seek someone out. I'll ping them and say, hey, can we talk for a few minutes? Talk about this. There is, it's a bit like thinking that you can set up a group of writers to churn out some great novels by putting them all in the same room with typewriters. How many of you have done significant writing? I've published probably about 1 million words. Not fiction. I do have my first fiction short story coming out. It's all been technical writing and so on. I'll tell you, a lot of my most productive writing time has been between 7 p.m. and 6 a.m. for exactly the same reason. I can focus on it. When my wife Sandra and I got married, second marriage for both of us, I was teaching at BYU and I was writing for Byte magazine at the time. She wasn't quite thinking, she knew I taught here, but she wasn't quite clear what else I did. All she knew is I had a bunch of computers in our basement and I'd play with them a bunch. And then I'd stay up all night, one night a month, and then a check would show up. And I'd stay up all night because my deadline was the next day. And so I would almost always write my column. I had a column called According to Webster in Byte magazine. I'd almost always write it the night before it was due. Occasionally I'd write it the night after it was due, and then I'd catch grief from the editor-in-chief, Phil Evans. But it was a sweet paying gigs. Can't make that kind of money writing anymore. Anyway. Worker response is often to go hide out. How many of you have been in work situations where you've had to hide out to get work done? Stories. What have you done?
So I was in this situation where...
Nice and loud, sir. I can hear you.
So I was in a situation as a student developer. We were working on some testing platform, and the guy who had started developing the platform wanted to do it in a way that the next guy didn't want to do. So as soon as he left, they started from the beginning, and so they're all working on all trying to work on it from the beginning again, while we had some other stuff that we had to get done. So you just have like we already had maintenance to do on different software, so I would always have to just leave and hang out in the server room and work on the other stuff.
Other stories? Yes.
Yeah, I was just in an open office and they would play music all the time, and so I'd either get there like a few hours before everybody else, or I'd just like try to work from home until I was sick so I could just work.
Yep. You know, I have, generally speaking, I have concerns about distributed development groups. You know, distance education, distance working, people working from home, and so on. But quite frankly, that is preferable to in my opinion, to open space environments. And I've seen this a lot with my own daughter, Crystal, who's a senior software engineer for a firm up at the Point of the Mountains. She works from home 2 days a week, and she says those are her most productive days. Because she just sits down and starts to work, and no one can interrupt her. She can ignore Slack, she can ignore email, she says it's my most productive time. Let's see here. Productivity measurement. You know, this is actually a great lead into what we're going to talk about on metrics, so I'm just going to skip that for now. Brain time versus body time. I suspect everyone here knows what it's like to get in the flow program. Get in the zone. You build this intellectual structure in your mind, and you can see stuff, and you're doing it, and then as soon as someone interrupts you, it all crumbles. Back when my first startup, joined my high school friend Wayne Holder at Oasis Systems. He was interested in game development. I had done some game design work, so he hired me to help out with the company generally. The main business was software development tools, but he wanted to do game design. That was basically my job, was game design development. So we're deep into programming and would ultimately become Sundog Frozen Legacy. And there's this one day where I'm sitting there programming, and this is on a, my target environment is a 64K Apple II. I know the entire memory map, down pretty much to the byte level. I've disassembled the P-code interpreter. I've written the graphics library from scratch. I know everything. So I'm deep in the middle of programming, and I've got all this stuff. It's like this big metal construct. And Wayne comes walking over to my office to talk to me. He and I have known each other since freshman in high school. He says, "Oh, hey, Bruce." And I ignore him. It's like, I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to get distracted. He says, "Bruce." And I turn around and I sort of glare at him. But I don't say a word. And he starts to ask me something, and I'm still not saying a word to him because I know the minute I open my mouth, this whole thing's going to go poof. And he finally sort of looks at me and says, "Well, I'll talk to you later," and walks off. I turn back and I'm like, I dodged that bullet. And I keep programming. About 2 hours later, when I've actually got everything wrapped up, I go and find him and say, "I really apologize, Wayne, but I had, I was in the middle of rewriting all this stuff. I had all this in my head, and I knew as soon as I opened my mouth, it would all vanish." And Wayne is actually one of the best coders I've ever known. He immediately said, "Oh, I understand. No problem." I would have done the same thing. One of the reasons why late night programming or evening programming also tends to be more effective, at least for me, your mileage may vary, is that your body gets tired. Not necessarily sleepy, but your body is just sort of tired, and you're not feeling anxious. You're not feeling like you want to hop up and take a hike or whatever, or walk around outside. And as you program later and later in the evening, your body it just sort of goes away for a while, like that. And you're actually more effective in what you're doing until the point where you start falling asleep while you're coding and making mistakes. There's always a point which I stop. The first time I wake up and there's a string of K's across the screen. Let's back up to the last safe state of the code, and I'm done for the night. The problem and the challenge that all of you face is you have more interruptions. Last startup I did, I'll get to in a second, Sean. Last startup I did, even email was relatively new. And its use was relatively uncommon. Didn't have smartphones, didn't have text messaging, didn't have Slack, didn't have social media. And frankly, once you got past work hours, no one would call you anyway because everyone else was, home eating dinner or watching TV or something. We live in more of a 24/7 cycle now, and you have to take more proactive steps to sort of protect yourself. Sean?
So I personally saw most of my bugs in the bathroom. That's my body is relaxed, nobody is interrupting me, hopefully. And you just doing it, and you can solve a lot of bugs.
You can. It's also and here's a perennial debate. How many of you like listening to music while you code? How many of you can't listen to music while you code? I found this is an interesting divide. It's one way or the other. But yeah.
I found that I can't listen to songs that I know.
Yes.
Because then I'll want to listen to the words and try to sing along.
Yeah.
I've got like 3 tiers, right? So there's, depending on the type of coding, you can listen to whatever I want, or have distracting tracks. Sometimes it's music without lyrics. And then there's other times where it's like nothing must be on at all times.
Yeah. In my case, I have certain albums or certain collections of albums that to me are sort of white noise. It's almost the opposite. I know them so well that I can put them on and they become part of the background and they're simply screening everything out. Case in point, Booty Blues. Okay? First Booty Blues album came out my freshman year in high school. I actually saw them in concert when I was in high school. That's how old they are and how old I am. I have a playlist right here on my iPhone, and actually on my laptop too, that is all Moody Blues albums in chronological order. And I can put that on, and it immediately becomes part of the background. I'll actually even hum along a little, but it won't distract me. And here's the interesting thing. If I try to listen to it on shuffle, it distracts me because it's out of order.
Yeah.
I have a similar playlist with all of Elton John's albums. Or I can do the same thing with Lord of the Rings and soundtracks and also the Star Trek soundtracks. But for me, I have to listen to them in order, otherwise it becomes too distracting. I have tried it with other things. I have a playlist that's all my albums. It's called Wireless Bare Naked Giants. It's Thomas Dolby, They Might Be Giants, and Bare Naked Ladies. And I've tried to listen to that when I code, and I can't because I sing along with everything. You know, I get too engaged, so. The telephone. Okay, this is basically nowadays, this is everything. Someone asked me a few weeks ago, you know, your ideal work center, what it would be, and one of the things I said is I'd be able from a master switch to turn off everyone's telephones. Not to keep them from phoning, to keep anyone from interfering from them. How many of you find notifications either popping up on your screen or on your phone distracting you while you're coding? Yeah? And you want to reply right away. So, this is not yet.
When I worked for OIT, I write software for them, and my boss would be like, hey, you should plug in that phone if you gave it to, like, put it at the desk. I'd never plugged it in. And he'd be like, you should really plug it in. And I'd be like, no, thanks.
I want to get work done. Yes?
So, I'm a junior software developer. I've got lots of questions.
Yeah.
If talking is too loud, it distracts everybody around me, and notifications for Slack and email also break people out of flow, what's the best way for me to ask my many questions while being respectful of...
Take them out for donuts or lunch. No, seriously, take a long lunch. One of the things back, I may have already mentioned this, at Pages, there was a group of four of our engineers who would go for 2-hour lunches every day. And actually had the CFO complain to me about that. And I immediately pushed back. I said, hey, these guys are working 12 hours a day. I don't care if they take 2-hour lunches. And I know if they're taking 2-hour lunches, 3/4 of what they're talking about are the problems they're working on. They're talking about the issues. So take the person, find some way within the context of where you're working to get them away from the others. And talk, schedule some time. Say, let's go have lunch together. I've got some questions I'd like to ask you. And sort of save them up. Get a notebook, write them down, jot them down on the card. So that when you're asking them, you can get it through in one sitting as opposed to asking a new question once an hour. Now, part of this, if you're starting someplace brand new, you're learning stuff, there's going to be someone is going to have to take responsibility for bringing you up to speed. And they're going to have to live with the interruptions, quite frankly. But try to find ways to do it so you're not disturbing anyone outside of you and the person you're talking to, and that you try to save them up so that the person you're talking to can devote, say, an hour to answering all these questions, and then has the rest of the day to work instead of answering one question an hour. Yeah.
Just kind of related to that, I think if you're helping someone or asking a question of someone else, it's important that if they're helping you, you don't get distracted by notifications as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah, don't.
I work with an intern, and I'll be helping her with some problem that she has.
And she suddenly
Her
looks at
phone
the
will go
phone.
off and she's working on her phone. But
Oh,
trying
oh,
to help her. I'm like,
oh.
I'm with you.
It's like, put the damn phone down. You know, oh, yeah, don't ever do that. Don't ever, that's just rude, yeah.
This might be backtracking a little bit. You mentioned that people with pages work 12-hour days. I remember reading in the Peopleware book that they're not supposed to work your engineers over 40 hours a week. How do you kind of reconcile that?
Well, we didn't know better to a large extent, and also a lot of the work was, we're still trying to figure out what we're doing. In other words, we had a lot of time that tended to get chewed up during the day. If I were to do it over again, I probably wouldn't have us working the hours we did. I wouldn't have me working the hours. I averaged 70 hours a week for the first 3.5 years. And my reward to myself when we finally shipped was I stopped coming in to work on weekends. I limited myself to Monday through Friday. I would do things differently if I had to do it over, because I'm not convinced that the long hours and even the 100-hour stretches were, in effect, that productive. You can do it. You can do it for short terms. But as the heroic model of software development, the idea that, yeah, we can just, it really dates back to the Macintosh. Back before the Macintosh was released, word bubbled out that the team that was developing the Macintosh system software, and for that matter, the hardware, had T-shirts that read, "Working 90 hours a week and loving it." That instantly became a Silicon Valley meme. And that was sort of what everyone aspired to. We're all, you know, we're going to do all this heroic work. And the problem is this sort of filtered out. And even as the software industry discovered that, no, that's really not terribly productive, management says, yeah, we can get all our software engineers to work, 60 or 70 hours a week, and we'll just get stuff done faster that way. As opposed to saying, what's a rational work schedule, and what should we actually be doing? Bring back the door. I don't know if I already mentioned this, but one of the things professionally I'm proudest of, at Pages, we started out, I literally was hired by the founders to build an engineering team from scratch. I went out and found office space. I hired an office manager, started hiring the engineers, and we expanded that initial office space, but it was more chopped up into 3 or 4 or 5 offices with several people to an office. When we closed our venture funding, we leased a new building for office space. And one of the things I insisted on was that every engineer had her or his own office with the door. Every one of us had our own office, had a closing door. You're all in one part of the building, so you could walk out and you could go. All the offices had these, long side windows, so you could look in and see what someone was doing, decide whether or not to interrupt them. We had a kitchen area, we had other common areas, but frankly, almost everyone did their own offices, and I think we were very productive because of that. People are, generally speaking, less likely to bother you. Now, I will say this. And this is a management issue, and this is a team leader issue. You have to be careful that you don't end up with developers who are hiding out. That is, developers who spend all their time in their office with the door closed, not interacting with other developers, and not getting work done. If you're not carefully tracking what's actually going on, you're not doing what I have Sean doing, which is talking to each of your team leaders once a week and talking to one random team member. You can get 3 or 4 or 5 weeks down and suddenly find that this one developer has been stuck on a problem for 4 or 5 weeks and not making any progress, and that just throws your whole schedule off. She or he may have just become your critical path. Taking umbrella steps. Oh, he talks here about workspace. Yeah. Wave hands. We're going to take our break now. We'll come back at 1/2 and we'll have 2 more lectures, and then we'll talk about what's up for next class. Just ping me and let me know where I don't really have anything going on.
A week.
Okay. Good. In that case, remind me that I'll do all the phone calls.